Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sharon Altner, and I'm a Senior Curriculum and Learning Designer at QUT, and I'm also one of the TELedvisor conveners, and I know that I have a number of TELedvisor conveners also joining us today, such as Colin, Hank, Wendy and Penny as well. I think they're the people that I can see on the list at this stage. So I'm delighted to be able to host this event this afternoon about getting into research, because it's a topic that's very close to my heart. And I'm delighted to be joined by such a wonderful group of TELedvisors who are actually doing research. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which you are joining us today, and pay my respect to their elders. I would also like to pay particular respect to the Turrbal and Yugara people, on whose lands QUT now stands, and recognise that the lands on which I'm joining you from today have always been places of learning, teaching and research. What I would like to also do is just to give you a brief overview of the format of today's webinar. So I have a series of questions that I would like to ask our panellists, and then there'll be key times where we will invite your comments and questions throughout the session. So in terms of housekeeping, I would ask you to keep your microphone muted to avoid background noise. And to ask any questions, make comments, share resources that you might have via the chat. And when we get to the Q&A session, just to raise your hand so that we know that you would like to take control of the microphone and ask your questions of our panel. So in terms of our panel today, we have Dr. Rebecca Ning, who is a postdoctoral researcher at University of Wollongong. And previously, Rebecca was a learning technologist at ANU, and her beautiful daughter, May, which is our learning design research recruit, has also joined us as well. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Stephen Abblitt, who is an academic development manager at Keypath, and who has extensive research experience in learning design, educational technology, and has experience also in academic development. And he's currently the academic development manager of Keypath. Kate Mitchell, who needs no introduction, from University of Melbourne, is one of the founding members of the TELedvisors community. So welcome, Kate. And Kate is currently the Senior Learning Designer at the University of Melbourne, and is focused on, her work focuses on the e-portfolio technologies and pedagogies associated with that. Next, we have Dr. Swapnell Thite, who holds a master's degree in electrical engineering and a PhD in engineering education from the University of New South Wales, where he's currently working as an educational developer. And he has an award-winning doctoral research that has been published and at peer-reviewed conferences, and also in top-tier journals. We then have Kashmira Dave, who is a lecturer in academic development at UNE, and she has 20 years experience in Australian higher education, and over those 20 years, a phenomenal 9 different universities is where she has worked, and she has worked in both professional and academic roles, so brings that experience to the webinar today. And finally, Dr. Suman Laudari, who is a senior educational designer at the Centre of Teaching and Learning at ANU, and his research interests include digital literacy competencies and learning designs. So what I will do is I will now just stop sharing the slide, and I will start with my very first question. So Rebecca, I might start with you first of all. Can you tell me a little bit about the type of research that you undertake?
So the research that would probably interest this group is I'm together with Sharon, as well as Meredith Hinds, who's not here at the moment. We research about how the professional identity of learning designers. I guess part of it, and I know it's one of Sharon's question. We met a while ago at an Escalade event. In 2018, and we were the only professional staff who were interested in research at that time, and that's kind of how we got together. And part of it was just understanding our own identity at that time, and so we got into that research over the last 5 years. So that's my research interest. But aside from that, my postdoc work is around working with children using digital technologies.
Thank you, Rebecca. Kate, tell us about the research that you do.
At the moment, I'm actually doing research with Kashmira, which is and as well as Meredith, actually. I originally got into research in these roles and doing my master's. I'm the only one out of this amazing diverse group to not have a PhD. So, and it's mostly just been that I kind of see problems occurring where I'm at and want to know why those things are happening. And then I get interested and fall down rabbit holes mostly. I'm currently doing a research paper around third space with Kashmira and Meredith and another team member, and that's kind of going through revisions. We did a similar one for Hertzer recently, Kashmira and I. Colin and Chia and my said name, what's in a name paper still seems to get reference, and that was like an Escalate one, 2017. So so it's kind of just slowly moving into publication, but originally sort of more through conference papers has been where I've started, or just through masters.
Thank you very much. Stephen, tell us about the research that you do.
I think a lot of my research comes out of, I guess, the work that we do at Keypath. So it's very much, and the work I do with the learning design team. So I'm very much focused, I think like Rebecca is, and I think like a few of the researchers are here today, on learning design as a practice and as a profession, our professional identities as learning designers, but particularly, I guess, professional development frameworks and things like that for learning designers. What we need to learn and how we need to learn it, I think is really what I'm interested in. And I guess I come to that because it's part of my job. And I think one of the things that I've found in this sort of in research generally outside of universities is that it's much easier if it's part of your job. There are a lot of opportunities in a place like Keypath to share the sort of great work that we're doing. And I think a lot of opportunities with a large team of, I don't know, around about 50 learning designers to really do some really great work around the PD that we do, or threshold concepts in learning design, or learning designers' backgrounds, those sorts of things. I think a large part of why I'm doing the work I'm doing is because I have access to such a large and amazing group of learning designers.
Great, thank you. Swapnell, would you like to share with us?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. So I have actually, my research, the PhD that I did was on teamwork in engineering education. So specifically things like rubrics, peer review, peer assessment, frameworks for teamwork in engineering education, and also a teamwork index specifically. But now I've also started my research in the AI in higher education space. So I'm currently working on a research project which is basically testing our assessments and then having AI submissions, AI generate those submissions, and then we are doing an analysis to to compare the regular submissions just to see how vulnerable our assessments are. And then that is going to go through into looking at how students use AI as well, probably in the next year or so. So yeah, at the moment, these are the research interests for me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Kashmira, would you like to tell us about the research that you do?
Yeah, so my PhD is in active learning and learning design, basically. And the component of that was around using semantics. So how you present the task. So basically task design is the core of it. Currently, what Kate said, I'm not going to reiterate, but it is around the learning design and third space community and their identity. I'm also interested in learning about biases in academic selection process. So one of my research at the moment is around how selection panels biases impact the selection process from starting from screening to interview and the result. While I was doing it, few people came up to me and said, why didn't you include professional staff? So I have amended my ethics application and now included and collecting data for professional staff's experiences around biases. I'm also looking at emotional and creative part of AI. I just got involved into one of those. So how you can improve creativity. So like probably using AI in arts. So music and those drama and that kind of like art-based creative writing. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Thank you. And Suman, would you like to tell us a little bit more about the research that you do?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think I have similarities with some of what's been said, but I think my research interest stems from sort of back in my master's degree in TESOL. So I bring sort of an intersection, my research sort of intersects between two fields, TESOL or teaching English in a second language context, and technology. That sort of led me to my PhD in digital agency of teacher educators. And yeah, so since then have published in areas, issues and topics of, say, technology use within higher ed space, including, maybe one or two papers coming out would be on, say, portfolios and things. Yeah, and again, some of my research actually goes back to developing context, because that's I have an so immense interest in what happens in that context, especially around technology use, because it feels like, because technology, I think, brings a lot of things that is people didn't have in the back in the days, and it sort of gives access. So that's another area that I'm actively pursuing. Yeah, and then published papers with academics and colleagues from different universities, and would like to acknowledge Pingo and Marty, who are in the room, I guess, who I published with. Yeah, thanks.
Great. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to open this question to anyone in the panel. And as TELedvisors, why do you do research? Kate, this looks like a question you want to answer.
Of course. I mean, like, the big reason is the fact that I see, especially in the early days, I think it's changing now, but seeing other people who may not be in our roles doing research about and for our roles, I get a little bit frustrated at that, because I feel like really research should be participatory and involving the communities that are a part of that. So I think that's shifted a bit, but certainly in the early stages it felt like it was really only a lot of academic roles in the space doing research about third space, and so I felt like there was a gap there around our roles. And then also just being in this community in particular has been really great to just form networks and be able to work you know, cross-functionally or cross-disciplinary narrowly with other people in the space. And I think that really gives, you know, a well-roundedness to like our voices and to what's happening in the third space. So, I mean, that's not the only reason to kind of do this work, and certainly like there's obviously other reasons to do research in other areas, but if we're talking third space in particular, I think that's a really important piece, is to hear that diversity, both in terms of the people, the methodologies, the experiences, because it's, you know, it's quite a diverse group.
Somebody else like to jump in and tell us why, as a TELedvisor, that you do research? Kashmira.
Yeah, so I think I have two reasons. One is short term. So my short term and small research are focused on currently the problem that I'm working on, or I'm seeing where I'm working, so surrounding me, and I want to solve this problem. So that's my short term, which usually go to conferences and things like that. The long term is, I think, and because this is a panel where we want to guide TELedvisors, other professional staff to do their research, I think that you have to curate it in a way that what you want to see yourself in 5 years' time, and see what kind of research will cater to your need. So I think that's my advice. Yeah.
Right. Stephen, do you like to contribute anything to this question?
I think Kate articulated a lot of my thoughts really well. I think for me, a lot of it is, you know, there are gaps in the research around sort of third spaces and learning designers in particular. And I think a lot of work needs to go into sort of demystifying those sort of roles in our practices and making things a lot less opaque. And I guess through that, you know, being better advocates for the work we do and the impact we have in universities. I think that's something that really drives me, is that when I work with faculty or go into a university and I say, hey, I'm a learning designer, it, you know, means 6 different things to 6 different people, and there's a lot of confusion or misunderstanding around what the role is and what we do. So I think a large part of it for me is, yeah, that sort of demystifying aspect.
Yeah, thank you very much. Any of our other panelists want to jump in on that question as to why, as a TELedvisor, you do research?
Yeah. Sorry, can I? Sorry,
Yes.
Swapnell. Just wanted to echo what's been said so far, and wanted to add to the contribution by saying that I think research actually provides that opportunity for me to reflect on my own practice, and see, you know, where the opportunities lie for us to improve, I think, the practice. And yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I keep doing what I do, despite the, you know, busy schedule and the family and everything. Thanks.
Thank you. Swapnell, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, it's just to add on wonderful answers. I'm definitely interested in the third space, and it's so good to know that there's already research that's been led by all these amazing people. So yeah, I would love to talk to all of you after on that. But for me, I love research because it gives me that opportunity to increase my knowledge. And I believe in lifelong learning, and that's also one good way of increasing that. But also, I'm really keen in educational innovation. We are in a very exciting time in this 21st century with so many new, like so much research going on, especially with AI in the picture, and I'm sure many more things to come. So yeah, that just keeps me going in education research. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for your responses to that question. My next question, which I'm sure a number of people that have joined us today are interested in, is how did you get started doing research? So you're working as a TELedvisor. How do you get started?
Can I?
Yes, please jump in.
Yeah, I think I've got twofold answer. I think sort of 2 answers to that. One, I got to, learn about research in my master's degree. And I thought, hey, this is interesting, did a couple of research as part of my assessment, a very small scale, and wanted to keep it ongoing because I realized that, again, just to echo what's been said earlier, it helped me learn new things. But I think, continuing that journey, academic journey, from master's to PhD. So, I think research becomes such a part of what you're doing as a PhD researcher. So I think that would be my answer. But also, I guess more now, it's been a while since I've, out of that PhD field. As a professional in the third space, I feel that there are so many opportunities for you to look into, demystify, unpack, and understand the nuances. So that's, that would be my answer to that question. Thanks.
Somebody else would like to contribute? Rebecca.
I was just going to say that I've never met a learning designer who's not curious. And so if I had something to say about getting to research, I think it's just jumping into it. And let your curiosity lead you to what you want to find. So yeah, this is a wonderful community to do that.
Okay, someone else would like to talk about how you get started?
Yeah.
Swapnell.
So yeah, just very similar to Suman. I did I was doing my master's in electrical engineering, but I got an opportunity to work on a thesis project, which was on flipped learning. And ever since that time, I think that was the best decision I took, because that's really put me on this path of going deeper and, going into research, doing a PhD in the same field. So yeah, that's how I got started. And yeah, really fortunate that I came onto this path. Yeah.
Kashmira, did you want to add something into this as to how you got started, or how others might get started in this field of research, or any research?
Yeah, I learned the hard way, but because my role is to present here the as an academic perspective, I would say that research isn't something that you decide today to get started and you can start. There is some background work that you need to be done, and I think to begin with, just familiarize yourself with the area of interest that you have. Read widely, and try to see what are the kind of methodologies or the topics that people discuss, how people get the ideas and how they work through it. While you're reading papers, I think you will know about different methodologies, structuring research, the kind of data collection methods, and all the nuances that you will need to know when it comes to ethics. Some universities now, I think most universities say yes, but some universities would not allow you to be a chief investigator in ethics approval if you are a professional staff. So just finding out whether you can or cannot, that is also an important aspect, I guess. And also be consciously aware of what you're doing. So when you're doing something and like days and days, and for me, days, months, years passed, and I thought that I'm doing a great job, and people anecdotally said that, but it did not translate into anything. No awards, no publications, no sharing ideas, no going to conference, no networking, nothing. So, and other thing that I would say is that be part of community of practices where you get to collaborate. So my suggestion is that start with, don't start with the idea that I want to publish the paper, because if you are trying to do it all by yourself, it is going to be very hard. And then if you don't succeed, it will give you a lot of, grief. So just have a collaborative project. And if you're working with unit coordinator, be bold and say, how can I contribute, and can I be in that evaluation process, or be part of the research? And I think that's the first thing you start with.
Okay, so I'll just move. Sorry, Kate, you've raised your hand.
I'm just going to be contentious and say, like, I'm not even allowed to mention research in my role. Like, it's like there's a view that it has to be done outside of time, which means that like it is really a difficulty in participating. I've been at other places where the goalposts have shifted partway through. We've been told one thing and then that changes, and then having to account for your time as a result retrospectively, which then becomes quite stressful. So there's there's a lot of I think just being aware of, I guess, like Kashmira mentioned, but I note that it's really difficult in the space. I tend to do stuff outside of time, but that's where I really have to collaborate, because I can't run a household and a family and a full-time job and do research in my own time. That's more than, without research, I'm already a 2.5 load, really. So you kind of have to be strategic about it. That's where I'll note that, like, in our roles, it's really useful to be looking at existing methodologies that fit our practice as much as possible. So I'm a fan of design-based research, and Tom Cochrane in Ascalite does a lot of work around that. And looking at design-based methodologies that would fit into a learning design framework already, or autoethnography like Kashmira and I are doing, which is really just personal reflections. And in our work we generally do reflective practice anyway, so finding methodologies that maybe don't require an ethics process and that already fit into the kind of design cycles that you already do can be an easy way to kind of entry in and justify that, and maybe not get stuck with some of those other kinds of challenges.
No, thank you very much, Kate. And I think it's great to acknowledge the challenge that some people working in that third space have in terms of getting ethics clearance. And I know that from the work that Rebecca, Meredith and I do, we have to do it through collaboration, because you just can't do it on your own. So I think finding those collaboration partners is a really fantastic tip there. I guess what I'd like to do is just ask the question. So we've talked about research, we've talked about collaboration, we've talked about a couple of barriers there. How long does it actually take to do a piece of research? Anyone want to comment on that?
Such a good question. I would say text, I guess, depends. I guess what kind of journal you're targeting, I would say, but the amount of and the volume of the, I think, research work that and Colin, you know 8.5 years and counting. Yeah. So just to reflect on a paper that we published recently, I think it took over 3 years for us to complete the work. But the process of getting the manuscript, to the journal and getting it to that published status was quite long as well, and there were a lot of technical issues and this and that. But prior to that, the collection of data, especially if you're collecting data from challenging places and you have collaboration with international colleagues, time differences, work schedules, workload, I think all of that impacts. So could be, I don't know, there's no definite answer, but can be very long, I can say. Yeah, thanks.
So it's not something you're going to whip up on a weekend?
Oh, I wish.
Absolutely.
Can I share an example? I think that
Yes.
others might. It's not about research, but we sent and my colleague Pingo, we worked on a paper. Sharon, I think you read that paper.
Yes.
We sent it to the journal, and this was sent out for peer review, and somebody decided to put it into ChatGPT and get a review, for us. So if you want to AI your work, I think you can whip it out in a week, in a weekend. Otherwise, not possible. I would say not even for a peer review, I guess.
Yes. So
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Sorry,
Yes, Kashmira.
Hank would agree with me that the editors will definitely find out. Until and unless you acknowledge, and the the topic itself is about looking at how AI generates outputs on your questions. I think sometimes it's very obvious, but practically, I think 3 to 6 months in design and ethics, and another 6 months on data collection. So it's 1 year, and analysis and writing will be another 1 year. Depending on what kind of journals, if you're targeting, it could take somewhere between 3 to 12 months, sometimes even more. So it's it's a long process. So starting with small action research and publishing into conferences are, I think, better way to start. So under AskElite community mentoring program, we had a colleague from Melbourne University who we were mentoring, myself and Hank, and he was able to produce something which was, he already was doing it, and the data was already existing in the system, and he just created a reflective paper on how this can be better used, or make it more useful. And that kind of paper does not require any ethics, because the data is already existing. So that is faster way of publishing and doing research. So what I want to emphasize is that while you are doing your long-term project, which will take 3 years, you also focus on, keep your eye on what is already existing in your around you, which is already a data, open sources, papers. If you're a learning designer, you have your LMS data and all of that engagement. Do you see a gap? And how you can use that already, like analytics or anything, that data to answer your particular problem in your context. And that does not require any kind of like all those like first like year and a half that I said in terms of timeline. I think it was it was you can minimize that and straight go into analysis and writing and go for conference papers or posters, I guess.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. The next question I wanted to ask you is, and anyone can jump in and answer this, how do you decide where to present or publish your work? How do you make those decisions?
So I can tell you about that. So I told about the journal, the conferences, but if you were preparing, like if there's an important research that you want to go for journals, so first of all, of course, because I've done my literature review, I know what journals I have referred to, and those are mostly the journals that you go for. But I'm just putting in some links into the chat. Those ones are journal finders, and they're according to publication. So what you do is that you go in there and say, okay, my research is on learning and teaching, and type in those keywords and try to find out what are the kind of journals. My suggestion is not to go for like the top one, because first it takes a long time to publish, and other thing is that you have a possibility of rejection. Rather go for like a little lower so you can publish quicker. And so yeah, I use the journal finders.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to add on one of the tools is also Skymago. Skymago is also one journal. It gives you a distribution in terms of H-index and all the different fields and criteria that you could use. And also just wanted to, it came into my mind about, there are also special calls for journal papers sometimes. So that could, if it fits in with what you're doing, then it could be a potential way to fast track that process as well. And in terms of also conference papers, I also look at some peer-reviewed conferences that are usually related with the journals that you're interested in. So if you somehow get to understand this is the journal I'm looking at, then there's always a conference related to that, and you can always go for that as well. Yeah. Thanks, Stephen.
Stephen, you?
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of targeting the types of journals that you read, so that you know, for example, I'm doing a lot of work in socio-materialism at the moment. So which are the journals that are publishing the papers that I'm reading to inform that research? I think that gives you a really good sort of sympathetic I guess. But yeah, I think a lot of the success is exactly what Swapnell has said. It's finding the right calls for papers and finding the right place for the research. That seems to be where I've had the most success in whether it's for a conference that turns into a journal article, or it's something like the recent OPM book chapters. A lot of the better stuff I've done has been in response to those very targeted calls. So it's how do you find those, I guess, has always been the question. And a lot of it is yeah, you know, knowing the right people, having the right networks to get to those calls for papers early, or to have a really good, clear understanding of what they're asking or expecting of their authors as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I might move on to the next question. So you've gone to the trouble of producing an article, you've been through the rigor of getting it published. How do you promote your work once it's published? Kate, why don't we start with you?
I probably don't. I mean, like I used to be on that one letter word that used to be Twitter that I won't mention anymore. I'm now pretty much on LinkedIn. So those are like, yeah, social media is a good place. But otherwise, like being at conferences or being in communities where you get to do webinars like TELedvisors here or other Ascolite groups, or you know, presenting at conferences, or I do a lot for ePortfolios Australia, so I can kind of present half-fledged ideas as well and get feedback, which is really useful. Or if I'm not ready to do something formally, it's a good way to push that out. Or if I want to report back on outcomes of something but in a lower risk way, it's just a really nice way to kind of do those sorts of webinars. And then yeah, I can also promote those out through things like LinkedIn. So that's generally how I kind of promote stuff. Or just looking at what conversations are happening around in other spaces, and then going, and obviously being like, you know, you could say, oh, look, that relates to this, and here's a link to this thing, as long as that's done in a respectful way, because I've seen people who tend to just like sometimes just blanket link, you know, like self-promote in ways that is maybe a little bit too shameless, which I'm like be respectful and mindful, or like, you know, make it sure it's relevant. But if you're having a really relevant conversation and you mention something that is pertinent, then I think that's okay, as long as you're not just blanket like self-promoting stuff in places where it's not relevant. So that's what I tend to do. And just, you know, we build lots of good communities within our spaces as well. So within institutions, we have like you know, professional development channel, and we promote out things that are happening there, and promote out research that we've done or that other people have done. So, you know, you can kind of do that within your groups as well.
Rebecca, we haven't heard from you for a little while. So how do you promote your work?
I think Sharon knows I'm not and I think Kate mentioned this, I don't really like self-promotion very well, but I guess there are ways that are not so self-promoting in that sense, like going to conferences that you really like, talking at, you know, going to community groups that may be interested in your topic, and actually slipping in some of your research at that time. But also, I guess Sharon and I, and you know, Meredith, you know, we've been working on our own website so that it's something that we can share with other people, pasting link. And yeah, I think reaching out to your community and talking to them about your research, you know, you don't have to tell them that, oh, I published something, but actually kind of get them into, you know, the topic. I think it really is quite good at promoting your research, you know, in a different way.
Yeah, Kashmira.
So I just want to mention that forums such as this one, so TELedvisors, or myself with two other colleagues, we are leading learning design special interest group, where we are providing opportunity to our members to come in and share their research or ideas or any innovation that they have, even if it is not a formal research. We are open to accepting like people presenting in our SIGs for their innovative practices. So reach out to those as well. And I also get a lot from a community of practices and attending them. So I think that's also a good way of sharing your research, because I mean, if it doesn't reach to anyone, so I think it is a fine balance between being very self-promoting to not promoting at all. Because if you're doing research, that means you are trying to solve a problem that was kind of like, catching your attention. And if you're not sharing it with anyone, what's the point? So I think you should, so social media like LinkedIn is one of them, but other community of practices, look out for any sharing opportunity, even in the school presentations. So sometimes in my university, there are school-based community of practices where they get together and share their practices. That's one of the opportunity as well.
Great. Anyone else wanted to talk about promoting research? Okay, so if there's no questions there, then what I'd like to do is a couple of rapid fire questions for you. So we'll go around and we'll start with Kashmira. I'm assuming that we're all pinned in the same order, but I'm going 3 questions that I want to ask you. So we'll start with my first question is, what's one research tool or technology that you could not live without? Kashmira.
EndNote.
Swapnell?
EndNote.
Stephen?
I'm actually going to say Qualtrics. Stats IQ and Text IQ in particular does all of my data analysis for me.
Brilliant. Suman? You're on mute, I think.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I got distracted by the chat.
Yeah, that's fine. So what is one research tool or technology that you could not live without?
NVivo.
Okay, Kate?
I mean, obviously referencing it, but I'll say free access to journal publications through your institution. Like library database access is amazing.
Absolutely. Sorry, Rebecca?
NVivo for me, for sure.
Okay. And what's your favourite research book that you would recommend to somebody wanting to get started in research? Kashmira?
Academic Writing and Publishing, a practical handbook by James Hartley. I will put it in the chat.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Swapnell?
I would say Research Methods in Education by Lewis Cohen. More on the methodology and how to get into doing that.
Okay, Stephen?
Oh,
sorry. Stephen?
I'm a sociomaterialist, so it's Tara Fenwick's work, Emerging Approaches to Educational Research, things like that really helped me. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Suman?
Same as Swapnil. I refer to that book, quite often and quite a lot, actually. Yeah, thanks.
All right, Kate?
I really like How to Write a Better Thesis. That was like something that helped me so much with my master's. There's also How to Write a Journal Article in 12 Weeks, which I'll also put a link in the chat.
Brilliant, thank you. And Rebecca?
Social research methods, because research methods are usually the hardest with analysis, and this one kind of gives very direct, straightforward advice by Ellen Bryman.
Great, thank you so much for that. And my next question is, what is the best professional development that you have done to help you to develop as a researcher? So Rebecca, we'll start with you this time. We'll go in reverse order.
Caught me off guard. I think just reading blogs, really. I think for me, it's often the getting started, getting some ideas, collating information. And blogs are usually my I don't know why, I just love blogs. Just getting started.
Great. Kate?
I actually think social media communities have been amazing for my practice, just connecting with other educators and finding out what's out there, and similar to Rebecca, being able to see different outputs of, you know, research that may be formal and informal.
Suman?
I would say COPs, but also social media. Not that I'm very active. I'm not actually on any social media. But you know, conversation with colleagues actually, you know, who you partnership with, you know, collaborate with in research has been, you know, helpful for me. Yeah, thanks.
Stephen?
Yeah, it's finding a good, you know, mentor. I was lucky to bump into John Hannon at La Trobe in one of my first LD roles, and he's been a great mentor for me. And this is going to sound like a plant, but I really, really got a lot out of the Ascolite Spring into Excellence Research School. I think that was a really fabulous networking opportunity, and to get some really good advice from some really experienced researchers. Yeah.
And just on that, can you just put your hand up? How many of our panelists have been to that that event? So it's a Spring into Research School that Ascolite puts on. Okay, so 50%. I also thought it was brilliant as well. Swapnell?
Yeah, I would say that a recent one is on LinkedIn. If you follow the top researchers in your area of expertise, they do share a lot of new articles and things like that. But I would also agree with Stephen. If you have a good mentor and in that specific field, it's really good to collaborate, get some brainstorming ideas through, which can really help in your professional development. Yeah.
And Kashmira?
So I don't think that there was only one, but at times, as I moved on in my career, I think my requirements around my research was and what I needed was different. And so different things and different programs contributed to my development or research capacity. Spring research into this Ascolite program was I attended last year, but which was focused on like one, and it requires some grant to go there, because then you have to stay there for several days and all that. But that was useful as well. But I think that I attended that too late, because most of the things I knew. So it is at what research maturity level that you enter into certain program that is more of an importance than where it is coming from. And of course, mentor, but I think mentoring others also play a very crucial role, because they ask you questions that sometimes you haven't thought of. So I'm not sure Matthew White is here, but from, yeah, I don't know, but if he's here.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, okay. He asked some very difficult questions around when we were mentoring him around what to write and how to write and why we are doing this. And that also refined my thinking. So I already said to him, and I'm saying this in this forum, that that was very helpful as well.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to now open it up to questions from our participants. If you have a question, could you please raise your hand?
I'll have a question. It's just about about the work you do with academics. You know, as many of you are learning designers working in a third space, working with academics, how do you see research as a way of connecting and engaging with academics, or as a good way of doing that?
Yeah, like I do, in that, like I'm still waiting for the paper to come out, but an academic in dentistry and oral health, Claire McNally, and another colleague, Ashley, and I have written a paper for a journal around e-portfolios, but it's really like finding keen people. And if you find someone who's keen, and you can then figure out a way to make that work in terms of the time and workload, and have that ideally like supported to some extent, or you can kind of slides under the radar, or if we could work, you know, as a learning designer, if it needs ethics, like using the academic or an academic developer, where that, you know, having that partnership where they can cover that bit, and then you can support both with, you know, the data gathering and the literature and the writing in aspects, you know, where that's suitable in workload, and just really being clear about that relationship. I think it's really, like, really valuable. And, you know, I think just being really clear about like what everybody's workload is and what the shared goals are and where you want that work to go, because like so much is about, like, everybody has limited time, and so everybody needs to be strategic. And so if it helps, you know, anyone get some kind of value out of it for themselves, it's always going to be what's in it for me, and finding what that is as a team is really useful, I think, because I just know that everybody's got such precious time, but it's a really great way to build those relationships, I think.
Colin, you have a question.
I do. I guess this is and maybe you don't necessarily need to answer straight away, but just have a little bit of a think about it. What could a group like the TELedvisors do to help you research, to put you in touch with other people? Could we look at running professional development sessions, advocate for things like, because I think this is a really important part of our activity. I think it's a great way to advance knowledge in the sector. It's a great way to demonstrate our expertise. So it seems like with such a group with broad expertise, we should be able to do more. So if you've got any immediate thoughts, go for it. But yeah, just maybe stew on that and pop something up into TELedvisors teams otherwise.
Yeah, I think I have something to share. Like Colin, I think that research need for everybody is different, and somebody has advanced a little bit, and somebody is like really fearful and haven't even started, and then they don't even know. Now, starting with academics, as Kate mentioned, is also, in my opinion, difficult, because the autoethnographic piece that is coming, which we wrote. One of the reflection that I had was that my professional standing overridden my academic skills, even though that I had that PhD at the time, because you're a learning designer and you don't know about research. I mean, I'm academic. I'm not like, but that's a reality, you know, that that professional divide still exists, and I think that. So universities or organizational priorities, as well as the level at which the particular learning designer or professional is, I think one-on-one mentoring. So you create a pool of mentors where people can say that, okay, this is what I'm trying to do, and then pair with a one-on-one like mentoring. That would be like, I think, most useful.
I think, oh, sorry, Rebecca.
No, Stephen, go.
I was just going to say, I think TELedvisors and Ask-alike, these sort of groups generally are really good at connecting researchers. And I think, you know, finding ways to make and strengthen those connections is really, really valuable in a group like this, because there are so many of us who are working in and around similar themes. I think the other things are around sort of how do we as a group make our research more visible, and how do we, I guess, advocate for the idea that TELedvisors and third spaces are and should be researchers. I guess those are some bigger challenges that I'm always thinking about.
Yeah, and just adding to that, I think having TELedvisor is a great space for a lot of learning designers who are interested in research. And just coming to this, for example, I found people who are interested in the research that I'm doing. So I think it's connecting with people, but it's around also kind of finding different areas of interest. And I think TELedvisors having something like this, or in an ongoing basis, can really facilitate people to come together in smaller groups to do research in the areas that they are interested in, and get mentored, I guess, you know, for people who are more experienced, less experienced, etc.
Okay, I'll just throw to Yogita. You've got you've had your hand up for a while. you like to ask a final question for the webinar?
Thank you, Sharon. My question is more around how do you gauge what is publishable versus what's just still a seeding idea? Because in the area of work that I am in, I have a team of fantastic learning designers, me being the lead educational designer, and we do heaps of stuff at unit level, embedding active learning and things like that, bringing that to psychology and recognizing that psychology is a science. Controversial, I know, we'll probably park that for another one, but taking STEM approaches into psychology and doing heaps of work at unit level. And I try and encourage my team to, publish that at different stages and different podiums, but they're all very apprehensive of, it being a very tiny thing, or it's just limited to this unit. Is it publishable? Is it worthy of publication or not? So any ideas on what, is there a rule of thumb, or how do you know when you're ready, or this concept is ready to go out and be shared with the community?
Yes, Rebecca.
Like you wanted to answer. Oh, sorry, Rebecca.
Oh, sorry, I thought...
No, okay.
I mean, I kind of like, if it's a case study around a single unit, like that's great for conferences, I reckon. If it's sharing new knowledge, or maybe you've developed a framework, that's where I think like that's a much meatier thing that is really useful for a publication. So like often it kind of depends on, I guess, how transferable it is, whether it's creating new knowledge is like my rule of thumb, but I'm conscious that I don't have a PhD and other people will probably have better advice for me.
I just wanted to kind of add that planning to publish is actually is really important, in the sense of, and I think Kate is right. You publish at different things are published at different levels. So for example, if you are still doing a work in progress, you have some data, you could publish parts of it that you are willing to share with people, because once you share it out, it's harder to publish that specific data. So you can select and choose to publish, say for example, in a conference. But I just wanted to add, so that it's not like like, oh, you need a lot of data to publish. Yes, you do need data to publish, and there are papers that don't need any data, but that's a different thing. But I think what's important is to know where you fit in amongst the literature, what gaps there are. So for example, I'm doing currently a study that if it was replicated in developmental science, it's absolutely fine to publish the exact same study from a different angle. But it is about finding the angle and making best use of that data. So, and a lot of it actually comes down to planning from the beginning. Because if you don't plan and you realize, oh, I have all of this, it may not make sense as a whole piece as well. And so that would be kind of my advice with publishing.
Right, Rebecca, you've ended up answering another question that I had, which was around how much data do you need, and do you need to be data ready, or can it be anecdotal and driven by experience as well from staff and students?
Yeah, so for example, if you were doing so I think Kashmira and Kate, you are doing an autoethnographic work. You can't, I guess, in 6 months' time decide, oh, I'm going to write something autoethnographic when you haven't actually, done that due diligence of writing down or noting along the way. So, the question around whether you can use people's words, etc. The question is around, do you need ethics? Is it I guess, from a research perspective, you're looking at, have you followed some sort of protocol that you can report on? And all of these, I think, come into play. I can give you an example that I recently reviewed a paper in a Q1 journal with only 3 case studies. Very small sample, but fantastic paper, because they've planned really well with the kinds of data they received and what types of data, how they were analyzing it. So it just depends, that in terms of understanding how much data you need.
Yeah, and definitely planning goes a long way. I would agree.
Okay.
Just to add, you don't need data. Literature review can be a paper as well.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you. I would just like to ask you to join me in thanking our panellists today for their insightful sharing of their research journeys and their tips for success for people wanting to get into research. And we will have a recording of this event up probably within the week in case you want to come back and look at anything afterwards. Could I do a plug that we do have the Third Space Symposium. So we have a slow symposium happening towards the end of November, and we have the in-person event happening in Melbourne on the 1st of December. And I'll also do a plug for our next TELedvisors event, which is the 29th of August. And it's going to really focus on a practical session, tips and tricks for making educational prompts for Gen AI, customised chatbots or agents. So thank you all very much for attending today's webinar. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.